Why would you want one repulsor executioner when you could have 3 repulsor executioners? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics. Today we're doing another quick tip video. This one will be focusing on defensive profiles across your army list, specifically focusing on armor saturation to go along with tank weak, the principle of having a lot of armored targets to divide your opponent's firepower. Now this is quite an important principle in my opinion when building lists. Lots of people do it naturally, but some people don't always tend to consider it as much as they could when they're building an army list. The basic principle is this: if you're taking an army that's mainly involving heavy vehicles and tanks, then the more of them that you have, the more your opponent's anti-tank firepower will be stretched thin trying to deal with all of your armoured targets. Say you're playing an enemy army that's mainly infantry with anti-infantry weapons, and your opponent has thrown in 3 Predator Annihilators with 4 las cannons each as the main anti-armor element of their list. Quick spoiler, we might be having a video on Predators later today. You're building a list and you want to include at least some Space Marine tanks in the list. Now those Predator Annihilators are quite nasty. Without any buffs at all, they will take out around 18 to 20 wounds of standard vehicles every single turn before any buffs are even applied to them. So that's going to be around 1 or 2 of your tanks dead per turn. Now this is why taking a whole load of armour is better than taking just a few bits of armour mixed with some infantry. If you have, say, something ludicrous like 15 armoured vehicles on the battlefield, then your enemy's anti-armour will have killed only 2 of those, leaving you with 13 tanks to fire back with in your turn. If you'd only taken 4 tanks, then you'd only have 2 left in your turn if the opponent went first. You can see the difference. Your opponent will only be able to remove a finite amount of wounds of any given unit type per turn. So if your units have a ton of the same defensive profile across the army, then they're only going to be able to do so much damage to your army in one turn. Furthermore, if you don't have many infantry, and you can hide them, or you just don't have any soft infantry targets at all on your list for whatever reason, then all of the enemy's anti-infantry guns will be forced to turn on your tanks, where they're only going to have limited effectiveness. They will do a little bit of extra damage to your tank force, but they won't be doing anywhere near as much damage as if you had a bunch of infantry running around for them to target. Now this is just a general principle to be applied when list building. If you can, it's optimal to try and field an entire army of a very similar defensive profile. This will ensure that at least some of the opponent's army's weapons will be suboptimal. Say for example the opponent's anti-infantry weapons being less effective against an all-armour list. And it also gives you options to really focus down the units that are threatening to that one defensive profile. So in the example before, if you could manage to take out those 3 las cannon Predators and he only has anti-infantry guns left, then you should be halfway to winning the game, as the rest of the list shouldn't be able to do too much damage to all of your vehicles. There are quite a few top armies that are good examples of this in the current meta. For example, Eldar Flyer spam often takes nothing but Eldar Flyers. You're only going to have so many guns that are effective against these -1 to hit, very manoeuvrable and fairly tanky vehicles, so that ensures that they don't typically lose more than 1 or 2 flyers per turn at most. Plague Bearer spam and chaos lists that like to screen a lot of characters with smite behind a whole load of infantry are also good examples from an infantry spam perspective. Instead, this will waste all of your anti-tank weapons if they have no good units to target out of the entire list. The las cannon is never going to be efficient when it's trying to kill a plague bearer each turn. Marines can do this quite well with armour, and even if you do include a mixed marine list with lots of infantry and also armour, then that still goes some way to having this effect, because all of your army will have a 3-up save, or perhaps a 2-up in cover, and this will really hamper any of the enemy's guns that have low AP, such as say a load of Imperial Guard blast guns with AP nothing are not likely to do that much damage to whatever they shoot at in a Space Marine list if everything has a 2-up save. All of this boils down to the reason that spam is so good, and before the rule of 3, while we'd often see entire lists made of 1 unit, Games Workshop has to fight against this constantly with their rules to try and tailor the rules to make it suboptimal to play an entire army of 1 list. The rule of 3 that they implemented was one rule to help this. The fact that vehicles need screens with infantry to stop them getting tied up in close combat is another good one. Also, anything where a vehicle or infantry adds benefits to each other for being near each other can also help. And the fact that infantry interact so well with terrain and scoring objectives and also the more infantry you have in the list, the more troops slots you can generally fill, so the more command points you'll have. All of these advantages combined means it's still usually worth combining some infantry into your list, and helps to keep armies looking a little bit more normal rather than just big squadrons of tanks or knights or flyers fighting each other. Hopefully I've made that a little bit more clear in people's heads. The main takeaway message is that if you can maximize a lot of a defensive profile in your list without giving up too many other benefits, then it's certainly something you should consider doing. Tomorrow I'll be sharing one of my own competitive army lists, and it's certainly safe to say that that list demonstrates the concept of armor saturation really quite well. Thanks for listening to another Auspex Tactics quick tip video. Feel free to subscribe for more similar content, and particularly if you want to see more Space Marine tank videos in the next few days. I'll see you guys in the next video.